Hello, everybody. We'll take just a minute to let people join us. In the meanwhile, please say hello and let us know where you're from in the chat. We always like to see that as people are coming in. You're all usually from everywhere, which is always a nice thing to see. Oh, there you go. Okay. We can see where all of you are coming from. Great. Just take another minute. Let more of you join.
I've seen a friend.
It's always fun to look.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so let's start. Welcome, everyone. We'll take just, well, we just took a minute, so I won't go over that again, but welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm James Shaheen, TriSkill's Editor-in-Chief, and I'm happy to be here with you today for Demystifying Jhana, a premium event with Sarah Shaw. Since this is a TriSkill premium event, a special welcome to our premium subscribers. If you're not a premium subscriber, you can sign up at triskill.org/subscribe. We hold these events monthly. TriSkill is a nonprofit, and if you'd like to learn more about our mission or donate to TriSkill, visit triskill.org/donate. Today's Zoom session will be recorded. We'll share the replay link in a follow-up email. We'll be leaving time for questions at the end. You can ask a question by typing it into the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. If you type your question into the chat, I may not see it, but if you type it into the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, I will. Although I will check the chat, there's always questions that turn up there. So we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. Our guest today is Sarah Shaw, who is a faculty member and lecturer at the University of Oxford. She is the author of the books Introduction to Buddhist Meditation, Mindfulness, Where It Comes From and What It Means, and more recently, Breathing Mindfulness, Discovering the Riches at the Heart of the Buddhist Path. So that's what we'll be talking more about today. So welcome, Sarah. It's great to see you.
Hello, James. Thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you, people from very many places who've tuned in.
Yeah, that's always great. You know, we also spoke on the TriSkill podcast, TriSkill Talks, and we're going to drop that link in the chat. That's one way to get to know Sarah, but an even better one is to buy her book, and we'll put a link to that in the chat too. So Sarah, you recently published a book. Again, it's called Breathing Mindfulness, Discovering the Riches at the Heart of the Buddhist Path. Can you tell us a little bit about the book briefly and what inspired you to write it?
What inspired me was that quite a few decades ago, I was feeling very lost and having a very difficult time at university. And I decided to try meditation, and I found it quite difficult at first. And then I just had a really wonderful experience of happiness. And the meditation I was doing is samatha breathing mindfulness. I'm doing it now. It's the one I practice now. And it really struck me that there was just nothing on this kind of meditation in anything I read. And in the years since then, there's been more. But when I read accounts of very good meditation systems, they often dismiss other ones, and particularly those that involve samatha and jhana. And I wanted to write a book which didn't reject those methods because I feel they're very good. And I couldn't see the point in rejecting something that itself was good, but just a book which just gave a survey of how so many methods now are true to the ancient text on the Sutta on Breathing Mindfulness. And it's a very beautiful sutta because it's very precise, but it can be interpreted in various ways. And there's a balance, obviously, between conserving, adapting in all traditions. But the great beauty of the Breathing Mindfulness Sutta is that it almost just doesn't need it. The instructions are very simple and precise, but can be applied at any level from beginner right through to the most advanced practitioner. Making my breath tranquil, I breathe in. Making my breath tranquil, I breathe out. That's helpful to a beginner, and it's helpful to a very experienced person. So I wanted to write a book that wasn't resting on the rejection of another tradition, but rather showed how there were so many traditions that are actually true to the sutta. And,
with reference to the breathing mindfulness sutta, you point out in the book how different traditions emphasize different practices. As you say, you don't want to dismiss the ones that were prevalent or most popular. And you talk about the paths that emphasize samatha or shamatha versus those that emphasize vipassana or insight. Could you speak briefly about this distinction? Because I'd like to get to those traditions that were overlooked.
Right. Well, at the time of the Buddha and the canon, the normative method appears to have been that one practices calm first, samatha and jhana, and then moves into insight. There is an allowance for some people who might like to do insight first and then move to calm, or do them both together, or do a kind of what's called an Dhamma excitement, and the investigation carries them through. And all of these methods are accommodated, but I'd say the normative method was to do jhana, and which itself has some insight, and let it move more to insight in its more developed stages. But that doesn't mean the jhana doesn't have insight. According to the Abhidhamma, there is what defines right jhana is wisdom, mindfulness, and alertness. So there is some insight there, but it's not the main emphasis. What it seems to me like is I've been doing some gardening actually, and if you try and weed in a dry soil and pull things out, it's a tough job and it's dry, but you do it. But if it's just been raining all night and you try to weed, then everything just slips out. And this is the understanding of the early commentators like Dharmapala about samatha, that it softens things, saneya. It makes things easier and more malleable. So I wanted to communicate that, because there is a history whereby the samatha methods in particularly in Thailand were dismissed from about the beginning of the 20th century, because South and Southeast Asia wanted to stress the insight side of Buddhism, because it appealed to the cognitive and it appealed to the intellectual and the analytic. And they rather lost sight of the importance of practices they took for granted, which were the basic samatha ones. And in fact, even repressed at one point. Yeah.
So in other words, vipassana appeared to them to be more rational.
Yes, and more in line with global thinking, and more likely to produce a quick path in this very life. And that's an expression you often hear.
Right. So
a samatha path is a slow way to meditate, and you might have a path that goes on for many lifetimes. When I say slow, I'm doing it with humor, because it's just a more rounded path, you can say, if you like.
I like the metaphor of the rain. Samatha is like the rain that softens the soil. But samatha is linked to the development of the states known as jhana. So let's turn to jhana and how it's developed in the context of breathing mindfulness. And well, you might tell us what jhana is also.
Well, the word comes probably from a word meaning to think or apply the mind, though the ancient commentators like to relate it to the word to burn, that it burned away things. It's a state of absorption, and it doesn't have to be right jhana, so that, I mean, I can get into a state of deep absorption watching a bad detective movie, but it's not right jhana. It's the mind is very focused, but it doesn't have mindfulness and wisdom. But right jhana does have mindfulness and wisdom, and it's transformative. It changes the mind so that everything that had been unhappy before, all the bits that are restless, tired, anxious, painful, are changed. And there's a lovely image for the first jhana, that it's like a bathman who gets all these powders together and moistens them with water to make a ball of lather. And this is the jhana will change the context of the mind, the contents of the mind, so that the mind becomes unified in an alert and still way. And it is very, very restorative. You only need a moment, and there is a great sense of restoration and peace. This is what the commentaries say.
In the context of the commentaries and the suttas, what is the purpose of developing jhana?
Well, in the context of the commentaries, I don't think the purpose is even particularly questioned. It's to make the mind ready for insight, really. And the assumption is that you'll want to develop confidence, strength, mindfulness, alertness, and primarily peacefulness before you move to insight. And we do hear these days of people who've perhaps embarked on traditions where something's been unbalanced, and they become unbalanced because they haven't had this sense of a gradual and rounded development that will help them find peace at first from time to time, and then more fully in their practice and daily life.
Two questions.
I think the commentaries really just take it for granted.
There are two questions. One is, I think there's been a lot of discussion about how much calm, how much samatha, or you look at the jhanas, how much is required or necessary in order to support insight or vipassana meditation. That's one question. And the other question is, I've heard people also talk about, and you may have in the past, I've done 2 podcasts with you, I can't keep track, they understand samatha as a full path. So the first question is, how much is necessary in order to support vipassana or insight practice? And the second one is, can it be a path in itself?
To the first question, I'd say I think it really depends on the person. Most people, and particularly Westerners, need quite a bit of calm. And by saying jhana, we can make something slightly exclusive, which I'm meaning samatha here, calm. And there are a lot of states which, a bit like walking along the beach towards jhana, or when you get the fresh air, you get the sea air, you feel revivified, but you're not actually swimming in the sea. And there are a lot of calm states that do that. And there are many, many people who desperately need those today. I meet them, and obviously in universities and in other contexts, just to find some happiness and refreshment, even for a moment, is very important. And I was talking to somebody who works today, actually, who works with people in terrible, terrible conditions, refugees. And he says that the thing that can help him keep going is just being able to go to samatha breathing mindfulness from time to time and finding his happiness inside himself. And that gives him the fuel to help others. So the other thing I'd like to mention is service. It's a very unfashionable word now, but the person who practices the jhanas and who can find refreshment in themselves is in a position to help people much more. And that has been my observation. It isn't, I don't mean that people who practice insight don't help people, but there is something about how it refreshes the mind that it just gives more in the way of resources for people to help others. And that's been forgotten, I think, recently. We talk about our own achievement and enlightenment in this lifetime, but helping others is perhaps could be highlighted a little more now.
And the other one was, can it be a complete path by itself? I mean, does insight naturally arise?
My observation is that for many people it does, yes, but insight is needed. Just as some calm is needed for insight. They are, I mean, there's a lovely image, isn't there, of the bird with the two wings. Both wings are needed. And there is insight in some samatha and jhana, but it needs to be developed more fully in the end, need to go somewhere. And conversely, there is peace in insight, but that needs to be developed more.
Okay, so before, I'd like you to talk about the jhanas and the levels that are associated with them. But first, could you tease out a little bit for us what the difference between what we mean when we say samatha and when we say the jhanas? Just that distinction.
Samatha is a broader heading for calm and peace meditations. And in practice, I think a lot of people who do, say, a breathing mindfulness practice gain quite a lot of samatha calm, which is what they need. But they might not have a jhana to take home with them, if you see what I mean. I want to de-emphasize jhana as being the only thing you want, because actually most people in practice want to find something that gives a very, very good support for jhana. Jhana isn't taken lightly in the texts. It's something that needs a good support of the five faculties and sometimes time to develop.
Right. Given the emphasis on vipassana in the modern era, and especially in the West, people are discovering jhana and they become very excited about this. And they talk about the different levels of jhana. They're not to be taken lightly, perhaps, but you might want to explain what those levels are. I realize there's a lot of nuance and a lot of detail, but just generally, what are these levels?
There are four of them, which are right jhana, and they are characterized by, the first one is characterized by and large, there are other nuances to each one, by the mind being able to apply itself, to explore, say, an object like the breath, and joy and happiness and unification, one-pointedness, ekaggata. The second one has a lovely image of being like a pool fed by inlets, springs coming from within. And that's where the mind actually doesn't need to be thinking in any way. And it's not something you can say, right, I'm going to stop my mind thinking. It is that they will drop away because there is enough to sustain the mind through the joy of the second jhana. The third jhana is described as, like, another lovely image, as lotuses under the water, very clear. And this seems to be particularly associated with a very great increase of mindfulness and stillness. And this is where the joy has worked its way through, and there's just a very deep happiness. And then for the fourth jhana, even that happiness is not actually needed in quite the same way. So there is equanimity, which is very, very alert and mindful. You can, some people translate it as mindfulness purified by equanimity, or you can say equanimity purified by mindfulness, or equanimity and mindfulness. But there's just a very fine alertness which doesn't go off balance. And those are the four basic jhanas. And then there are other ones which came to be called jhanas, which are the formless meditations, more for the kind of person who really wants to specialize in samatha, I'd say. Yeah.
So one thing that jumps out at me when I look at these the progression is that it progresses by reduction. The factors drop away. It becomes ever more refined, and you use the word purify. You get to the fourth before, and practically everything has dropped away. What then are these formless jhanas? Is it just how would they be distinguished from these initial four?
The formless jhanas are really a way, not very much is said about them in the text, but they are a way of actually observing the mind as it's in meditation. So it's a way of stepping backwards behind. So anybody who's done a metta practice, a loving kindness practice, is familiar with the notion of infinite space everywhere. And that's the first formless meditation. You still need that good feeling or the of equanimity as the basis. And that's why they're only taught to advanced meditators, because if you hit them wrongly, I mean, there's a lovely image in the suttas. It's like a foolish calf that falls off a mountain path. You go down the snakes and ladders or whatever. So it's a way of looking at the mind that is infinite. And that's the first one, infinite space. Yeah. And the second is infinite chitta or consciousness, vijnana, actually says. And this is not looking at the object, but looking at the subject, that which perceives infinite space. And then the third one is no thingness, which can, the word akenshana can have two meanings. One is not having anything, so nothing is owned. And that's compared actually sometimes to the Christian notion of poverty, that nothing, there's no I to own anything, or there is no things. The difference between subject and object has dissolved into a sense that there is no thing there. And then the last one is neither sanya, perception, nor non-perception, which is where the mind is doing what is necessary to be there, but it doesn't have to do anything else.
Yeah, you know, I just to let our listeners know, if you look at Sarah's book, you'll get a lot more of this. So there's a broader sweep to the book. We're just focusing on a few things here. So I really encourage you to get the book, and we're going to put a link in the chat. I really love the book personally. So Sarah, while you show respect for other traditions and other approaches, and you made it clear before we even spoke that you don't want to diminish the importance of other traditions, you nonetheless point out that the practice of samatha, and consequently the jhanas, has been marginalized and suppressed. So why would that be?
I think it was not the people who were practicing other forms of meditation. And it was just that they thought, I think people were embarrassed about the often emotional and intuitive way that such practices are taught. They need one-to-one and quite a bit of care. And there was quite a movement in the 20th century, which was needed and justified, to bring rather rapid methods to the West to produce mindfulness, help people find mindfulness and insight. And alongside that, for reasons I don't understand fully, the practice of samatha was actually actively suppressed. One tentative conclusion I draw from the book is that when people experience strong joy, there can be a lot of tears and shaking for a few moments, you know, as something works through. And it's very normal for that to happen. And it's possible that people felt that that would not look good and would look like less mindful based trances. So that's one speculation I have in the book, that that's what happened, that people were embarrassed about that. But I don't know. They were suppressed though, and they were equated with the whole area of Buddhism, which is probably what we in the West most need now, which is the story traditions, the chanting traditions, a lot of things which are much more intuitive and interactive with the environment. Samatha was somehow, at some point, siloed off with all of these, and it was just this pure form of Buddhism which people wanted to take to the West. And that's still the case to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, I suppose the colonial period would have a lot to do with it too.
Yeah.
Subject countries, the colonized countries wanted to present their tradition as something, oh, this is rational, as when
Yes.
Christianity was presenting or the missionaries were presenting a threat.
Yes, the Thais felt that particularly. In Burma, it was, or Myanmar, it was actually much more urgent. They had to, they thought that Buddhism was completely at risk. They were colonized. The British wouldn't choose new heads of the Sangha, and they were getting a lot of Baptist missionaries actually from the States and other places coming in. So they did feel quite exposed and at threat. And so they developed methods which lay people could practice, because lay people were seen as the great saviors of Buddhism. And this actually had a wonderful long-term effect, as a lot of other strange things that happened in the 20th century did for Buddhism, that lay people just thought, right, well, I can do meditation. If they can, I can. And this had a very, very good effect.
You know, it's interesting. The case of Thailand is interesting because they were not colonized, and yet they were experiencing the pressures of modernity just the same. But there's one Thai in particular that may have, or seems to have, a lot to do with the resurgent interest in Jhana, and he's Nai Boonman. Can you say something about him?
Well, I've just been seeing him in Wales. I was on a retreat with him. He came over to the West in the 60s. He was a monk, and at that time, all monasteries in Thailand routinely taught samatha breathing, mindfulness, what he said, or samatha practices. It was just something people did. And he saw that it was being threatened and that these changes were happening. So he wanted to come to the West, but he couldn't say he wanted to teach jhana because he wouldn't be allowed to. And so in the end, he disrobed and came to the West on a motorbike with a friend, and worked at the Thai embassy in London, and then was asked to take a class. And he started teaching samatha breathing mindfulness. And he did tell one group of people what he was doing. He said, I want to teach the first jhana, because he saw that something was being threatened. And his group now persists in the group I'm in, and the Samatha Trust in the UK, and the Samatha Foundation in the US. So I mean, I use the analogy of trees in the book, but it's like a species of plant that does very well somewhere else, even though it's not being encouraged in its own environment. That's what, and of course, it really did suit Westerners, because we need calm, and well, I do anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he was very important in making this known in the West. And yet, he's a very interesting character. He's in his 90s now, and you describe him as, quote, someone who would have been quite happy to remain behind the scenes for decades. So he was a very modest presence also. Is that right?
Yes, and I think that's a very interesting characteristic of some of the major teachers, like Ajahn Tate was like that, Ajahn Sao, Ajahn Tanisro actually now is teaching methods like this, and they don't make a big fuss about themselves. And he wanted to do something. He wanted to make sure that his methods survived in the West, and he did not make the mistake of thinking he was the only person who could make that happen. Because, of course, the best way in the breathing mindfulness sutta, there's a lovely image at the beginning of people teaching others and others teaching others. He saw that for a tradition to flourish, you have to pass it on and get other people to do things, and then come back, maybe, which he did. Yeah.
Is it significant at all? I mean, I don't know that this person, that somebody came out of Thailand and say not Burma.
I think at that time Burma was probably very much more biased towards insight, and I don't think that's necessarily wrong, actually. It may be what was needed, if you see what I mean. That they were coping with a lot of difficulties in a certain way, and really needed to defend Buddhism in a rational and a way that appealed to the cognitive side of things. So there are samatha traditions in Burma, in Shan State, for instance, there are some traditions. And it could well have been somebody from Burma. It just didn't happen to be, I think.
Sarah, you said something earlier that really is somewhat surprising. The experience of an embodied sense of joy, samatha, and that it was dismissed or somehow challenging or frightening or disruptive to people. What isn't that a little bit odd? I mean, wouldn't one want to experience this joy that samatha promises in the jhanas?
Yes, I think so. And I've just seen somebody saying in the chat, could I talk a bit more about jhana and less about history? And and actually, yes. And that's why it always puzzled me, because when I started meditation, I was actually I had a lot of bereavement and loss in my family. And I just needed to find peace and happiness. And I'm not going to claim it was jhana itself, but it was a peacefulness which was, if you like, being by the seaside. And that really was refreshing and helpful to me and gave me a lot of strength. The states themselves, I noticed this webinar was called Demystifying Jhana. In a way, that there is something inherently mysterious about right jhana that I think you can't really describe. And another thing that I should say is that it is a modern Western habit for people to say they have attained certain states of jhana. That it's not done in Asia. There are one or two traditions that might, but most of them you would not speak of your personal attainment. And certainly in the way I was taught my method, we don't either speak of attainments in that way. It's a very ancient tradition in South and Southeast Asian Buddhisms not to lay claim to any states. Doesn't mean you can't teach them, but just to avoid, I suppose, personality cults and that kind of thing, and also a sense of competitiveness.
Well, they are graded, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah, I think,
that
oh,
inspires
they've got the
some
third job.
competition, right?
Second.
I want to get to some of our questions because, but one more thing I wanted to ask to make sure we have time in case the questions take up the rest of the hour. If somebody wants to start jhana meditation, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of support for it in the same way that mindfulness or vipassana or the Theravada tradition generally. So what if somebody wants to start this practice? Where do they begin?
I think there are a few traditions. I mean, obviously, my one does teach a jhana based practice, the Samatha Trust and Foundation. Lee Bracington has a system based on Aikima's methods because she taught herself. I think there's more around that I probably don't know about. I think Venerable Tanisaro in the States teaches methods that are seem to me to be leading to jhana. They might not tell people. There's a lot in Thailand, but it tends to be for people who speak Thai. There are, and Venerable Sudhira is another one who teaches jhana, not necessarily breath jhana, but so there are teachers around, and I think you just have to look around a bit. But the important thing is just to go somewhere where you feel at home. There are a lot of forest monastics now teaching various kinds of breath meditation. And I think at one time they tended more towards insight, but I think there are some of them that are more teaching the calm and possibly jhana now. I don't know.
Okay, so let me go to some of the questions to make sure we can get to as many of them as possible.
Yeah.
And I obviously have more questions if we run out of questions, but here, an anonymous attendee asks, in your book, Breathing Mindfulness, you mentioned several times about Buddha meditation, B-U-D-H-O. Can you explain that meditation?
Yes, this is apparently an ancient meditation, and it's where you say Bu on the in-breath and Do on the out-breath. So it's a way of just linking a feeling of joy that you might have in the sense of Buddha or the possibility of the awakened mind and breathing it in and breathing it out. And this is the wonderful thing about the Southeast Asian traditions of meditation, which something called invocation, really. If you assume something's there, it'll come. So you breathe in experiencing joy and you breathe out experiencing joy. This sounds completely improbable until you actually try it, and it sometimes works. And this is my understanding is this is behind this recollection of the Buddha, whereby you just hope and assume these qualities will arise in you with the in-breath, and then you breathe out the dough. And does that explain it well enough?
I think so. And if you have more questions about that, feel free. Judy Govados asks or makes a comment that you may want to respond to. Most Westerners see the mind as object. That's just the comment. Do you have anything about that?
Well, I think we do have a sense of we are slightly materialist. We've probably got the Descartes notion of the mind, and we all assume that our mind is in the brain, which is not a traditional assumption in many cultures at all. It rather seems the ancient Greeks assumed it was much more in the heart, and certainly the early Buddhists seem to have avoided saying too much about where the mind was, but if pressed, they would say the Hridaya Vatu, the heart center. So, and that's why Chitta is often translated as heart as much as mind. We all assume it's up here. Right. So we all think, well, you need neurological sort of assessments of the brain. But in fact, the descriptions of the jhanas are much more entirely in the body. I suppose. I mean, I spoke to a neuroscientist, and they said, but that would show that if there was a change in the parasympathetic system, it will show in the brain as well. But the assumption that the brain is at the center of it all is not always shared by all Buddhists. Does that answer the question?
Oh, yeah, it does. So again, people can continue asking. Judy Kennedy asks, could you address the issue of efforting? My early experience with jhana practice is trying too hard. I took a while to understand this. How can one understand and calibrate the energy as one is developing this incredible practice? Thank you so much for your thoughts today.
Thank you. Is it Judy? Did you say?
Judy,
yes? Yeah.
yes.
Thank you, Judy. I think that's a brilliant question, because the main problem most people have when they start certainly a breath meditation is they try too hard. And we all do. And it's almost like learning how to not try so hard. And you catch yourself unawares. And the Buddha has a very nice image about the lute that isn't too tight or too loose, but is just evenly strung. And you've got to find what suits you. I find if I just watch the breath and don't interfere in any way at all, I do eventually find a way of watching it which is settled and not trying too hard. But most people do try too hard, and that's why you can get problems. Yeah.
Jan Eismont asks, will we be practicing how to enter the first jhana today? If you'd like to take the last 5 minutes of this hour to lead us, Sarah, that's fine, but that's really up to you.
I'm happy to do a preliminary exercise, which is like being near the sea, if you like, rather than plunging in. But I'm happy to do something but whatever people are, and
I think people would like that. We can save time at the end and take 5 minutes, and you can lead us in that.
A couple of minutes then, and I'll try to encourage a way of looking at the breath without too much effort, because I tend to make too much effort. I really respect and understand people who have problems with that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So would you like to do that now? Or?
Oh, we can do that now. That's fine.
Or would you like to wait till the end? We'll wait till the end.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking of waiting to the end to get to more questions, but
okay. Well, let's have questions now, and then we'll do it at the end. Yes.
Right. So Nancy Johnson asks, what enables the jhana states to come about?
That's a very, very good question. The early texts talk a lot about the Pabhasara Chitta, the radiant mind, and some people have contested this, but by and large, there is an assumption in early Buddhism and in most Buddhist countries that the mind is actually naturally radiant and that we have problems, hindrances, and difficulties like visitors. They've come in and taken over our house, if you like, or they've taken over there's a nice clear pond and all these weeds and obstructions have come there. And so a jhana is a way of finding that again in an active sense, so that the mind is very active, but also very relaxed and still. So I tend to think of it as a kind of human birthright, that it's almost like, yes, this is what we can be like, it's our potential and what we could be like, and we can all do this. That's how I see it.
Okay, so Peter Vernetze asks, Sarah, I'm reading the book and I find it very helpful. One thing I'm struggling with, however, is the concept of nimitta. Will it just appear at some point? Are there practices that can help it appear? Thank you. So you might say what a nimitta is so that people know what.
A nimitta is a sign or a mark, and it's if somebody practices a breathing mindfulness practice, after a while, for some people, there is usually a visual, but not always, image that comes up in the mind's eye, which is the sign, the nimitta of the practice, a sense of peacefulness. And it's very nice if you do get it, because it tells you that you're making the right effort and that things are balanced. And it's almost like a guide for you. Some people don't get a visual image and might just get a sense of hearing something quieter, or some people might just get a touch sense of something soft, or as if they're in a different kind of air, if you like, a softer space. So it is very different for different people. And there's one text in the Anguttara that kind of says that if you ever get an nimitta, or what you think is an nimitta, then have a chat with somebody. So it's good. Sorry, I didn't catch the person's name who asked that question.
Peter.
Peter, I would suggest find a teacher of breathing mindfulness and chat about it with them. Yeah, it's very good if you do get one, but it's not. You may be getting one without realizing it. Yeah.
Okay, so Yaroslav Fuchnek asks, how would you relate the jhana meditation to the so-called modernization of Buddhism, Evan Thompson concept? We have a podcast with him too. Is it rather not compatible with modernism and Buddhism?
I think there are a lot of people who want to do a practice that is secular and is not Buddhist in inverted commas. And that's quite understandable. There's a scholar called Peter Skilling who says that the Buddha of today is sort of in a white coat. It's the scientist, and that we like things to be rational and secular. And again, I think that's fine. I don't see any problem until you perhaps might reach the point where you need something more. And then there are the Buddhist traditions to help you with that. I think that's all I can say really, is that I've known so many people come to meditation and the first thing they've said is, I don't want any of these trappings. I don't want all that. I just want something to calm the mind. And then they practice for a few years and they start to see the point of some of the things they hadn't before and want to deepen their knowledge of Buddhism. But that's up to them.
Okay, so D Rules asks, Sarah's books and talks are always so helpful. What role does compassion and loving kindness play in samatha meditation?
Thank you, Daniel. That's a really, really good question. They're very important. The 4 Brahma Viharas are a samatha practice that comes to be associated with jhana. They're associated with jhanas. And I think we all know why they're needed is that you might have some terrible character fault. Can you have compassion for that character fault? rather than just rejecting it. And this is why certainly my teacher Booman puts a lot of emphasis on the 4 divided abidings of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, which you can link to the breath as well. Because you do find things in the mind and the body which are very unpleasant and hard to deal with. But if you have compassion for that suffering, it really does ease it a lot. I'd also like to go back to the point about service I made earlier, that if you are thinking of other people as well and their welfare, it can help you overcome fear of many kinds. That it's not just for me. And there was a very famous insight teacher, actually, taught by Uba Khin, John Coleman, who the only way he could overcome fear in his practice, Uba Khin said to him, stop thinking of it as about you. You're going to help other people. And he overcame all his fear of meditation. So it's a very good question, Daniel. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. So an anonymous attendee asked, the distinctions between the different jhana levels sound subtle, if not fuzzy. Is it in fact quite clear to a practitioner what level one is experiencing?
That's another very good question. There is a kind of quality of energy to different levels of jhana, and I think it's different for different people. It is a very good question, and put it this way: if anybody's in a meditation state which is developing and going well, they're in the right one for them at that time. And it's I think it's not something to worry about in the sense of, will I be able to tell the difference? Things tend to refine in meditation, particularly samatha meditation, when you're ready for them.
So Brian Hughes weighs in and says, yes, because the jhanas are distinct, naturally stable states, it should be clear when a particular jhana is present. The experience should clarify the description, which may be fuzzy due to the difficulty in describing these states in language. That was somebody jumping in to answer that question too. Any comment on that, Sarah?
I think that there is a different quality. Meditators are very different. I think that's all I can say.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
an anonymous attendee asks, believe in experiencing joy and you will experience it. How to distinguish this from wishful thinking or fooling oneself?
That is a very good question, and it's a joy that isn't dependent upon an object. It isn't dependent on getting a job offer or a new coat or a nice cinema ticket. It is a joy which will just arise. And if it's there, and particularly if you're aware of the body and of the breath, it will likely be a joy which is on the path. It is an interesting point because we do experience joy in some situations where we really shouldn't. And so it is absolutely right to bring to mind the sila, the ethics that are involved. Yeah.
Just quickly, somebody asks, what book are we talking about? So maybe they came a bit late, but it's Demystifying Jhana. Oh, not Demystifying Jhana. I'm sorry.
Breathing Mindfulness.
It's called Breathing Mindfulness, Discovering the Riches at the Heart of the Buddhist Path. There's also a podcast about it, but the book is what you want to get. So Chris asks, you commented about which traditions teach jhana. Why do some Buddhists believe so wholeheartedly in the benefits of practice and walking the path of enlightenment, but are so reluctant to teach it to anyone with sincere interest? Aren't they aspiring bodhisattvas working for the awakening of all beings? Then why, when we are fully dedicated and beating our heads against the temple door, is it so hard to receive the teachings, especially something considered special like the jhanas? So long question.
What can I say? Yeah. I can't comment on that. I think there are different paths, and Theravada Buddhism has a wonderful characteristic in that you don't have to be a bodhisattva. You can take the path of the Arahat, which is for enlightenment in this lifetime, and you can take the path of the Pacceka Buddha, sometimes called the silent Buddha, that not everybody feels able or to teach or feels that they would be helpful with teaching. And I think you have to respect people's inner motives and hope you can find a teacher.
Okay, very quickly, will there be an audio version of will there be an audio version of your book? It would be awesome to be able to listen to the book and practice.
I'll find out. I usually do an audio version of my books. I haven't for this one, but I will certainly make that inquiry. Yeah.
Okay, I'm starting to worry that we're not going to get to all the questions, but we'll do the best we can. Claire Donegan asks, hi, Sarah, how would you contrast samatha with zazen?
Hello, Claire. Well, I think it's a very large subject. I would say a samatha meditation is slightly guided in a sense that zazen isn't, but it's probably slightly more guided. But I'm not a zazen practitioner, so I'm not going to put my foot right in it, I hope. I'm a samatha practitioner, and that's the one I know best.
Okay, so we have 2 questions left. On a one-day retreat, I entered a state of no thoughts or emotions. This is from Jeff. I asked myself if I could turn on and quickly turn off the flow of thoughts, and did that twice successfully. What surprised me was my feeling was neutral, neither joyful nor uncomfortable, just emptiness. Does this map to one of the jhanas?
I would need to speak to you to know, Jeff, what was going on, but it certainly sounds like an experience of equanimity of some kind. Yeah. Okay,
and Kyla asks, we have readers here, Sarah. So page 88 of Sarah's book, Buddhaghosa, argues that people experience the nimitta so variously. Quote, it's like people talking about the different effects they feel when they hear a sutta. They also differ. So to some, it is like a torrent in a mountain. To others, like enjoying the shade of a fruit tree. In practice, many meditators find the nimitta may not be visual. A sense of mild touch or a wave of peace or a gentle rushing sound may mark its appearance, which you touched on.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for finding page 88. Yes, I wouldn't have been able to find it. No, thank you.
So Kyla says it's not a question, it's just a comment. And I
yes,
take it
thank
as a
you.
comment.
Thank you,
it's a comment of appreciation, I would guess.
Well, thank you for finding it, Kyla. It's very apt. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Valentine Meyer says thanks. So let's go to meditation.
Okay.
That you are so generously offering. So let's go forward. And again, Sarah, the link to Sarah's book and the podcast both are in the chat.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So I'll just do 5 minutes of a short meditation, which is samatha in orientation. And let's hope it brings us some benefit and peace. So if we have our feet on the ground, if you're sitting in a chair or if you're sitting cross-legged, have your back straight. Your back straight if you're in a chair, and try and make it not depend on the chair behind you so that it's freestanding. But make sure your shoulders are relaxed and that your jaw's relaxed. And for your hand posture, for a samatha practice, it's usual to use the samadhi posture. So that's with the right hand resting in the left hand. So the left hand is cupped open on the lap, and the right hand is also open, resting on it, with the right thumb touching the left thumb. So the right hand is on top, and the thumbs are completely relaxed for this posture. It's slightly different from many Zen postures. And you can find a nice sense of balance there. And once you feel comfortable, see if you can make friends with your breath, which might sound a strange thing to do. But see if you can find it and welcome it in, and then let it go. And view it with an attitude of friendliness. It's always been there for you. And it knows a lot more than we think it does. The breath will help us with our meditation if we trust it and don't try and impose too much on it. Just guide it gently so that it goes to a slightly longer breath than usual. And it's helpful if so as not to make too much effort, to feel as if you're collaborating with the breath. Just let the breath be what it is. Let it become long till it becomes the longest breath that you can comfortably take. Just let it fill the body as it wishes. And then when you're ready, very lightly and gently, just count from 1 to 9 on your in-breath. Just drop the numbers in. And from 9 back to 1 again on the out-breath. Just keep awareness of the whole body and the breath just pervading the whole body. And if the numbers are too slow, just speed them up. Too quick, slow them down. Just let the mind rest on the numbers. Very brief. And now if you feel you've got that long breath established, just let the numbers go and follow the breath. Follow the breath as it comes in and out of the body while being aware of the breath around the whole body. But just follow as your focus the breath that comes in the body and leaves it. Keeping that broad mindfulness. And then come back to the numbers. 1 to 9 on the in-breath. And 9 back to 1 again on the out-breath. And then finish the practice. Let the breath do whatever it wants. But just remember that feeling of friendliness towards the breath and with the breath. Just for a moment, just let everything absorb. Being aware of friendliness or loving kindness coming in with the in-breath. And just breathe it out with the out-breath. May I be well and happy. May all beings be well and happy. and finish the practice.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks to everyone for joining us. We'll send a replay of this event and a follow-up email later today, so if you feel you missed something, you get to watch it again. If you'd like to learn more about Jhana, you can listen to Trischool's podcast episodes with Sarah, and also look out for a 10-day email series with Beth Upton that we're launching in September. We'll drop information about that in the chat. Again, Trischool is a nonprofit. If you'd like to subscribe, visit trischool.org/subscribe. If you'd like to donate to Trischool, visit trischool.org/donate. Thanks again, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you, Sarah. It's always lovely seeing you.
And you, James, and thank you everybody for your attention.
Yeah, a lot of great questions. Those were wonderful.